that's our history. That place that we enjoy, waves that we surf and it's beautiful, we love it. There's a deep, dark history there, and we embrace that. We know that that's there, and so that's our history, and we want to, we can't shy away from it. That's what it was, but we can change the way that we write history as Mozambicans, not have somebody else that's non-Mozambican write it for us.
Welcome to the Water People Podcast, where we talk story with some of the most adept and interesting water people on the planet. I'm your host, Lauren Hill, joined by my partner, Dave Rastovich. For us, this is a place to exchange not just ideas and practices, but stories, experiential knowledge gleaned from the aquatic adventures that shape us. We acknowledge the Bundjalung Nation, the traditional custodians of the land and waters where we work and play, who have cared for this sea country for tens of thousands of years. Respect and gratitude to all First Nations people, including elders past, present, and emerging. This season is presented in partnership with our friends at Stone & Wood, a brewery that thinks big and acts small, right from the heart of Byron Bay. Today we're in conversation with Mozambique's first professional surfer, Sung Min Cho, or Minnie for short. You might have seen Minnie's bright smile and powerful surfing in the short clip called Chasing the Unicorn, which highlights the burgeoning surf culture that has risen up in the wake of 30 years of armed conflict in the region. Mozambique is in Southeast Africa. Its 1,500-mile coastline mostly tucked behind the island of Madagascar. The country has a rich and complex history, like most do, but marred by both Arab and Atlantic slave trades and a recent civil war. About his country's recent history, Minnie said, quote, "A terrible civil war closed Mozambique off for decades, and for a long time after, the country was impoverished. There was no infrastructure. It was just ruins and devastation. And so there was a lot that Mozambique had to do to get to build up to where it is now. A lot of the early surf exploration was done by Portuguese and South Africans, and I guess like most surfers, they wanted to keep it a secret. There was no way for Mozambicans to get equipment, really, but then as tourism grew, more surfers came here and we'd see them in the water. Around 2011, Dominic King, a surfer from South Africa who was working here in Tofo, he taught the first group of Mozambicans how to surf, and it took off slowly from there. Minnie is part of the flourishing local surf culture that centers around the mythical wave that's nicknamed the African Kira. In 2018, Minnie co-founded Tofo Surf Club, Mozambique's outpost of surfers not street children, which empowers street kids through surf coaching and mentorship. The effort is funded in part by Pope Francis. Minnie is on a mission to earn representation for his country in the Olympics and spoke to us passionately about his love of surfing, not only for himself, but as a tool to lift up others, especially kids, and the importance of letting Mozambicans write and tell their own stories in their own words. Stories about a nation brimming with natural beauty, resilient people, and very, very good surf. Minnie, we always start the podcast by asking about a time or experience after which you were never the same. Do you have a story like that you'd be willing to share with us?
Yeah, actually, there's a lot of moments that kind of changed me or changed trajectory of my life. So I never grew up around the ocean. I was born here in Mozambique, but then I moved to South Africa when I was very young with my parents. They were working there, obviously for a better economic situation there. The work was a lot easier. So we lived landlocked. We lived really close to Johannesburg. So no ocean, grew up in the city. And so in 2012, I was 11 years old. We had to move because of xenophobia. So the xenophobia was really, really bad in South Africa. And it was targeted to a lot of the other African countries. So Mozambique were one of them. So my mom is Mozambican. My father is South Korean. So I'm a bit of a interesting mix. And the xenophobia is really bad. So we had to move back to Mozambique. We had no choice. We couldn't live anymore in South Africa. So that was a pretty big moment, one. But there was a lot more other moments in between. I grew up on the beach after that when I was 12, but the beach was foreign to me. Everyone loves the beach, but I would go to the beach and play football. I would watch the surfers in the water, but my mom could never afford to take us surfing, buy us a surfboard, do lessons. So for 2 years, I sat on the beach watching guys surf, wanting to surf. And then one day somebody gave me a surfboard, and that's kind of how it started. I think that kind of changed the projection of where my life was going, because I had no idea what I was going to do. We moved, everything that I knew was completely different. I moved to a beach town, and and it was just very new. And so fast forward a little bit, I started surfing. And then another moment that really changed my life is the first time I ever met the guys from Surfers Not Street Children. I remember that I was surfing, and one of the guys, his name's Ntando, beautiful inspirational story. I was surfing with him, and I wasn't a very good surfer. I was like 2 years into surfing, and I remember him paddling up to me and complimenting me on my surfing. It was like one of the first times that somebody's ever complimented me, and somebody who's so much better than you complimenting you, like that's like a big moment. So he told me like, wow, you're really good, you should try and do something professionally. And that kind of inspired me, because when I learned more about him and his background and how he grew up, he grew up in the streets of Durban. He was hardship growing up. I found it very inspirational that somebody like him said that to me. It kind of inspired me. And so that's why that was I think one of the big moments in my surfing journey that made me realize that I could do something with this, but at the same time, I could do it and help others at the same time.
Wow, that's so amazing. That's such an uncommon story when we think of people's surfing stories when they're in situations of sponsorship and surfing competitions and how they get to that stage. Yeah, that is a really unique trajectory. That's a really unique story. Minnie, thanks for sharing that.
Minnie, we first encountered your story a few years ago in the very excellent book, Afro Surf, in which you speak about learning to surf when you were 14. And I love that the person who pushed you in said, quote, "Close your eyes and stand up." But I wanted to ask you, why do you think he wanted you to close your eyes? And do you still teach kids that way?
Yes, I do. So I think it was more, I had been given this board, but no instructions on how to surf. The dude that gave me the board gave me a little tiny short board, and he just said, get out there. So I went there for like a week, and I was paddling, had no idea how to do it. I kind of looked like I was drowning, to be honest. But this guy, which is very close to my heart, Henry, he saw me like struggling in the water. So he pushed me onto his longboard and he told me, close your eyes and just stand up. Because I think I didn't even know which foot I put at the back. So I had no feel for surfing. And so I think it was one of those things where it's just like, stand up and whatever's natural to you is what it is. And so he told me, close your eyes, pushed me onto a wave. And then I stood up with my right foot on the back. And it only took one wave. I stood up on that one wave, and then he was like, there you go. Now you can go and learn. And so it was quite a cool lesson. When I was working as a surf instructor, when I started teaching kids, on the beach doing the pop-ups, I'll tell them, just close your eyes and stand up. And then whatever feels natural to you is what it is, And so that's always been a lesson that kind of has been with me for a long time. Because I remember I just couldn't fit. I heard all this talk, goofy foot, regular footer. I didn't know nothing. I just wanted to stand up on a board. And so he's just like, close your eyes and just do it.
That's so great.
I love that it's that simple, and that we can return to that. Like, as we progress in our surfing lives, a lot of us overcomplicate the experience, but it really can come back to that. Just close your eyes and stand up.
Exactly. That's it.
Did you have like a memory of what the ocean felt like for you before it started to become a comfortable place for you? Do you feel like you had a big story around waves and the ocean before you began playing among that space on surfboards?
Well, my earliest memories living in South Africa, we would go to the beach, we would hang out, we would swim, but we would never really play around in the waves. I remember going to the beach in Durban with my grandmother and my family, and they were very scared about us going to the ocean. So we could only like hang around in the front because, historically for them, the ocean is like a place where a lot of things could go wrong. It provides, but also it takes. And so my family were always scared of me going to the ocean, venturing off too far. So we were always like watched in the front. So when I moved to the beach, when we moved here in 2012, we had a bit more freedom going to the beach, and we kind of learned how to like beach, if it's like a verb, like we learned how to go into the ocean, swim with the waves, the tides, all these things. I didn't know about these things, all the tides and all this. So it kind of a slow process into learning how to get introduced into the ocean. But then I think it was like surfing just kind of was that leap forward. I don't remember too much between that. I just remember that when I started surfing, it just became this like journey of mastering, the ocean, because it's just like it's a mastery of the ocean. The ocean it's uncontrollable. You can't tame it, and so it's just something that was like, it was interesting every single day. And I was learning a lot. And many times I got humbled. I think we all do. I never grew up around, so I learned about the ocean. I never grew up around it.
A lot of our friends who have mixed family cultural heritage, they often, which seems like most of us at this point, but a lot of us speak about never quite belonging or always feeling like they're half belonging in either culture. Has that felt true for you? I'm curious about your Korean heritage and if you've connected to surfing in South Korea at all.
I have not. So yeah, my father's Korean. Like I said, I grew up, in a city, so the ocean was never kind of the priority. So I remember when I started surfing, because when I moved here, we separated from my father. So my father lives in South Korea. So I haven't seen my father in 13 years. And so I remember when I started surfing, I told him I'm doing this thing called surfing, and he doesn't know what it is, or he didn't know what it was at least. But my father's always been supportive. So he's like, I don't know what it is, but I know you're good at it. And so, he was always been supportive. And I've seen now over time the surfing community and industry in Korea is growing. In my father's family, amongst his brothers, his sisters, his mom and dad, they don't know nothing about surfing. So I'm first generation surfer in the family, and I think he's very proud of me. But to be honest, I'm not in touch a lot with my Korean roots, just because when I grew up at home as a Korean, I called my Korean name. But when I went to Korea, I didn't feel like I belonged there, because as a Korean, I was darker skinned. I had curly hair. And so I kind of felt a bit of an outsider. And everyone was looking at us, and people were like touching my hair and pointing at my mom, because my mom's obviously a black lady. So it felt weird. I remember coming back to Mozambique. When I came to Mozambique and I moved here, the first thing, one of the people in the market said to me was, "You're one of us. You're Manyambana," which means like you're from the Inyamban province. And so I always felt more at home here. I've always felt more welcome here. And I do plan on going back to Korea and reconnecting with my dad and trying to get in touch with my Korean roots. But I think I'm Mozambican through and through.
Wow. And when you're taking the young children into the water and they're closing their eyes and popping up to their feet, are the bulk of those kids local Mozambican kids who have grown up in that beautiful place you call home there? And have they also got a similar story about relating to the water that you had when you were growing up, as it being kind of a familiar space, but not always that comfortable, always a little bit scary and dangerous?
Yeah, definitely. A lot of the kids that we work with here with the charity are all from this area. They're all local Mozambicans that have a lot of heritage in this area. 5-6 years ago, before we started the charity, there were so many kids, but they were afraid of the ocean. But they had relation to the ocean because of their family before them. I heard the story where there was a kid who his father would go fish, every day. That's how he would provide for his family. He would travel far out at sea, fish, bring back, provide for his family. But he didn't know how to swim. And it was just crazy that they would do this to provide for their family, going into this danger, not knowing the basic skill of swimming. And there was a time where one of the boats had capsized. And so he was drowning, and I was working as a lifeguard at the time, and I went to go do a rescue. And this story was it was crazy to me, because I didn't understand how these fishermen that go so far out don't know how to swim. And so that was also a big reason to why, I wanted to start the charity, because there's so many kids that, they live around this ocean. The ocean provides. It's their background, but they're scared of it. And so, starting the charity was important for us to give them that tool of, this is yours, this provides, this is your future, and you need to know how to use it, And I think learning how to swim and surf is like a good step into that, because here in Tofu, it's very marine tourism based. There's a lot of tourism that goes around the ocean. There's a lot of kids here. A lot of the kids here are super, super smart, have a lot of potential, So once you give them the access to the ocean, and we've seen it in the last 5 years, of the charity, there's so many kids, so many groms, local kids surfing, swimming, starting to dive, so they're becoming a lot more comfortable in their own space, which is the ocean, which, maybe 6-7 years ago was a place only for tourists to come and hang out.
Can you speak to that a little bit for us? Because proximity is a big deal with things like this. If you live in the country and you're far from the ocean, then it's understandable that there's a fear of the unknown there with the wave zone and deep water and all that. But you all live right near that beautiful clear water and like you said, so much marine life and an amazing beauty there. What is it that happened in the timeline that made it so that fisherman you're talking about had no idea how to swim? Because we know that surely wasn't always the case there. How did it get to that place culturally where that kind of thing was the norm?
in my own opinion, I think someone who's a lot older than me and has a lot more experience in this area would be able to speak on it. But I would think that it's purely because of them having to provide for their families. And many years ago, there was not a lot going on in Tofu. It is a fishing village, and I still think it is a fishing village. It's obviously growing a bit more and it's more touristy, but Tofu's always been known to be a fishing village. And even in the beginning of time when this place was discovered, it was discovered because of fishing. And so I think it was just to the point where there was nothing else to do to provide for the family than to go into the ocean and find some sort of, way of making money from the ocean, whether that was fishing, whether that was, doing diving. But those people have been more experienced with diving. But I spoke to some people and they just said, there was no other way to provide because we live at the beach here and there's no jobs around here because at the time, many years ago, there wasn't many restaurants, there wasn't many bars, and the nearest city was 30 kilometers away, and they didn't have, I think, the adequate education to go and work in those areas. So they had to resort to working with what they have in front of them, which is the ocean. I think it got to that point that way, but now it's definitely changing. It's changing for the best because it's growing. The tourism is growing, but also the locals are growing, from the ground up. They're being educated more. They're been given the opportunities to be put into these industries and to grow among these industries as well. So we don't have those type of issues anymore, and we're having more and more locals, take charge in the ocean.
One of the things that I love about Afro surf is the cracking open of the idea of a single history of surfing story. We know that there's a long and rich history of wave riding in Western Africa. Have you found that to be true in the East? Is there sort of old or ancient history of wave riding there?
I've definitely heard about the stories of surfing originated in Hawaii and whatever, but it's been documented that there's been surfing in West Africa and Polynesian countries. So I think that probably West Africa where, there was the inception of surfing was there, somewhere there. In East Africa, it's not as popular. I think there should be. In my opinion, I think there probably was some type of wave riding. Definitely not as much as West Africa, because on the east, we don't get as much swells because we're blocked by, the island of Madagascar. And then we have swells riding up from the south to north. So there's not that many waves there. But surely with the trade and all the boats that were coming in many, many years ago, because I from what I heard, the early documentation of wave riding was like on boats in West Africa. And I'm sure that they were doing some sort of wave riding here in East Africa, surely, but I wouldn't know. I would hope that they would be. And maybe Madagascar, maybe because they're a lot more open ocean to us. So they get a lot more waves, a lot more swell. Here up in Mozambique, there's a little less surf because we're a bit blocked off from different areas. I would think so. I would think so.
I feel like it's a really exciting time as surfers right now where there is this opening up of multiple histories and multiple timelines throughout the world and the coastal cultures around the world where we're seeing that it is yes, Hawaii, where so many of the modern versions of surfing stem from the Hawaiian Islands and that influence of Hawaii upon Americans and even down in Australia. But also we see stories like Chinese surfing happening in the tidal bore river waves going up the main rivers. Like 2,000 years ago, we see images from, I don't know where these pictures have been hiding for so long, but there's so many pictures coming out these days of people all over the world with the most diverse surfboards and navigating crafts, boats, belly boards, you name it, all kinds of stuff. There's pictures in the very north of Australia of these kind of curved log surfboard rafts with some people standing on top of them like SUP stand-up paddle boards from 100 years ago. And anyway, there's many timelines that it feels really exciting to feel that there is quite a rewriting of our story and an opening of the surfing story right now. And it makes me wonder how you feel about, joining the modern surfing family, and what parts of it you look at and really admire, and perhaps what parts of it you look at and don't want to perpetuate, given that you're in Mozambique and you're teaching young children and you're essentially bringing them into this global community of wave riding. What is it about surfing for you that you look at and would love to adopt and perhaps would also like to not adopt?
Definitely with surfing, I think a lot of surfing communities all look at Hawaii in terms of the spirit of aloha. That's a great thing that everyone really loves, and a lot of people love that about surfing. That is a beautiful thing, that community feeling, that spirit. Us like surfers here in Mozambique, as surfers, we feel like we're a very small community, but we're very tight. Surfing as well, it's therapeutic. Going into the ocean, it's therapeutic. I at one point in my life was surfing because it was an escape from having all the pressures of life around me. Working, studying, all this stuff. It was just like too much. You go into the ocean, and as cliche as it is, you really don't think about all the problems in your life. You're just there in the moment, focusing on what's in front of you. So there's so many beautiful things about surfing, and with the charity, there's so many great life lessons that we can extract from surfing. For example, we say in the ocean, when you're in the ocean and you're learning how to surf, you stand up on a wave, and not even when you're learning, when you're much better, you stand up on a wave and you fall. And as a surfer, your first instinct is not to go out and quit. You're going to get back up and you're going to try again. It's the same thing that continues in life. That's what we try to instill with the kids. And when you're out there, you wait for the perfect wave, and that's the same thing in life. You're waiting for the perfect opportunity. When it comes, you got to take it and go. So there's a lot of beautiful things around surfing. But in saying that, the things that we're trying to change here or trying to avoid is the one thing that I personally, as a surfer, traveled around and experienced that I really don't like is the idea of localism, but not like there are people that are from there, and they are the protectors of it, and they're the people that are from that land. But I don't believe in not sharing the ocean with people that come in, and the idea of violence in the water because you've come into our place and you're not invited. It's a tough one, the localism subject. There's a couple of spots that I've been to traveling, and you just don't feel welcome. And surfing is just such a all about like there's such a, it's very spiritual. That's something that we try to teach the kids, that there's no place for that, there's no need for that. Everyone is welcome into the ocean, and sometimes people do things in the ocean and it's not right, but you can just go up and talk to them. You never have to be like, this is our land, don't ever come back here, don't surf here, and be super aggressive. There's ways around that. So that's definitely one of the biggest things that like I would not like to see happen here in Mozambique, just the whole ownership of the ocean and localism. Like I always feel that sometimes surfing, we become like even in the ocean. We're just so insignificant to this big body of water, this massive body of water. We're all equal, and so that's definitely one thing that I do want to see continue on. And it's been good because here, I think in Mozambique and in other African countries, which I've spoken to other people, us African people are very warm, very welcoming. So it's for us to be, intense and try to fight because we love to see people. And a lot of us, we rely on, tourism and all that stuff. So we know that we need you guys to come in here and help us. And we like to see new people. And growing up here, you kind of feel like you're in a little bit of a bubble. So I've always looked forward to meeting other people, connecting with other people from different places in the world, because they tell you about where they're from, and it sparks this curiosity of, oh, I want to go visit you. I want to go see what your community, what your wave is about, So that's the beautiful thing about surfing, because you just get to connect with all these people from all different parts of the world. Yeah, it's an amazing thing. And so, without me doing what I did and pushing Mozambique out and being in those books, I would never be right here speaking to you guys, So it's just like connecting with you guys sparks my interest in like, oh, maybe one day I would love to come visit you guys and surf with you, or I'd love to get to see you guys come visit me and surf here, And so that's like a super cool thing about surfing, like the whole network of surfing.
Yeah, agreed.
Minnie, you've said that you feel that African surfing is leading the way in terms of inclusivity, especially gender inclusivity. I'd love to hear you speak a little bit more about that.
Yeah, definitely. I think that, first of all, African surfing is leading the way in diversity, inclusivity. In Mozambique here, we have Julia. So Julia, she is the first Mozambican female surfer, and she's an inspiration to a lot of us, myself and all the kids. And then in South Africa, there's a bunch of, great female surfers. In West Africa, there's so many. And so I think, many, many years ago, there was always the stereotype that women can't go to the beach, they got to stay at home, they got to do all these things. But times are changing. I think surfing is becoming a bit more inclusive, and people are starting to see that, surfing is for everyone. And here in Mozambique, I can speak of Mozambique. In other countries, I'm not too sure how it is, but in Mozambique here, having somebody like Julia, she was the first female surfer. And then the first time she ever left the country, she went to Mexico. And all the girls here, all the parents saw that. And they were like, wow, surfing took our, this girl, Julia, that we know, took her halfway across the world, her first time ever. They were like, wow, surfing can actually do stuff for our children. I remember, when we started the program, I tried to get more girls involved, and it was very difficult in the beginning. But having somebody like Julia leading the way, inspiring other girls would see that, parents would see that, and see how she lives her life very positively. And she's doing very, very well because she's in the ocean, she's surfing, she's doing what she loves. Parents saw that and they're just like, wow, we want our children to also be part of that, because surfing here in the small community is it's a healthy thing to do. It's such a community. It's great to see that there's a lot of females taking up on surfing here in Mozambique. And I think in a couple of years, there'll be so much more females across the whole globe of Africa, not only West Africa, not only East Africa, but the entirety of Africa. And, I think once surfing changes to the point where like marketing, instead of having your typical, Caucasian white person marketing, they use African women, and I think they are moving towards that direction. And so many people are starting to see that. And this is like new to us, but it's like beautiful to see beautiful African women marketing for these big brands, because it inspires a whole new generation of girls who want to also do that, who also want to surf, who see all these women marketing, but they're also surfing amazing. They're surfing incredibly, So that's a great thing.
It is. It sure is. I'd love to kind of step back a little bit in a tangential way. The Pope loves surfing. Can you please tell us more? And how that led to setting up the Tofa Surf Club?
Yeah, it's a very, very interesting story. So I'm not too sure what year, but Kelly Slater was in J Bay and he met up with Tom Hewitt, who is the CEO of Surfers Not Street Children. Kelly heard about the Surfers Not Street Children program. He connected with Tom and he connected with the guys, and he really, really loved it. And so they did a video called Continuance. And in that video, Surfers Not Street Children featured. And somehow through the surfing networks, the Pope had seen this, because he really likes surfing, and he saw this. He saw Kelly Slater, he saw Surfers Not Street Children, and he wanted to connect with Tom, And so Tom went over to Rome, he spoke with the Pope, and the Pope was just like, yeah, I really love surfing. And the fact that you guys are using surfing as this tool to change lives, to make the lives better of people in the community, I really like that. And, we would like to do something together. And so I popped into the conversation and proposed that we do something in Mozambique. I've always loved the idea of doing something in Mozambique and helping. When I started surfing, I didn't want to be the first surfer and be the only one. I wanted to be the first of many. So, I was trying to push the sport and grow the sport of surfing. So when the opportunity arose of starting a program, I was like, let's do it in Mozambique and let's do it in my hometown, and I'm going to run it. I was 17 at the time. I was very young, but I was 17 at the time, and I started the charity. And obviously, being very young, starting a charity at that age, you get a lot of criticism. People are like, wow, he's so young. But I always say that there's no age on passion. If you're passionate about something, it doesn't matter how old you are, how young you are. If you're passionate about something, you can do it. And so I was passionate about helping other Mozambicans and seeing surfing change the lives of many kids, as it did myself, giving me direction and a path in life. And so, I started that when I was 17, turning 18, and then I've been running it ever since. And so, interesting, quite cool story that the Pope reached out and helped us.
It's so incredible. It's so fascinating. I'd love for you to talk us through the specific work that you do with Surfers Not Street Children there in Mozambique. But I'd also love to hear you talk about why there was such need for this kind of community support and organization. Mozambique came out of civil war in the early 90s. How has recovery been from that kind of cultural trauma, really? How have people recovered? And why did you step in to fill that need for a community organization in Tofo?
Yeah. So my mom was born just after the Civil War, and so she grew up in Yamban. And then when she was older, she moved away. My mom has always told me stories about the Civil War and how terrible it was. Even after Mozambique gained independence. So Mozambique gained independence from the Portuguese, and then there's this brutal Civil War. My mom was always told me about stories about that, and my grandmother as well, because my grandmother worked at an orphanage. And I recently asked her, when you're working at the orphanage during the time of the Civil War, were there a lot more kids? And she was like, wow, there was so many kids, because in the orphanages, there was the only place that was like, the orphanages, the schools, it was the safe place during the Civil War. And so when we moved away to South Africa, I think part of the reason as well, because the economy here in Mozambique wasn't very good and my parents couldn't make a living here. So they left and we came back. And to be honest, when you live in Tofu, it kind of feels a little bit like a bubble. You don't really experience that or see that as much. If you were to ask the people who are much older, they would tell you a lot more. But you see that when you go to the city in Maputo, in the city, you can see that, the country's still building back up from the Civil War. I think after the Civil War and the War of Independence, there was not much left for Mozambique. So Mozambique had to build up from the ground up. So here in Mozambique, here in Tofu at least, when I started surfing when I was 14, there were surfers before me. There was a core group of surfers before me, 5 or 6 of them. And I don't think they ever saw it as a career path. There was a couple other kids in between them and me that were really good, but it's very easy to fall into the distractions of Tofu here, because it's a tourism town, and there's that negative side of the social of everything here. So partying, drugs, all these things, these terrible things, So I think a couple of these kids fell into that because they didn't have any guidance. They didn't have any mentors, people older than them that were surfing and in that and did it professionally or did it to make a living. It was always this kind of thing that they did as a pastime. So when I started surfing, the core group of surfers, there's a couple of them that I looked up to and I surfed with them. And to be honest, I think that they could have been a surfer, like a professional surfer before me, but they fell into all these things. And so when I became the first surfer, I promised myself that I would never fall into that. And when I did get to a level where I'm professional or, I'm of some status, that I will help people and help other surfers to grow and not, kind of give them the guidance. And so, growing up in that time, seeing a lot of kids in the streets, they were drinking, and falling into all these distractions. It was heartbreaking to see, because these kids would surf and they would surf very well. And that would kind of drift them away from the ocean and from surfing. And so I wanted to start something here that guides the kids in the ocean, but in the correct way. And so that's why we started the Surf Club. It's a diversion program that diverts the kids away from the street life, keeps them in a safe space, takes them to the ocean, teaches them how to swim, how to surf, and just keeps them away from all the distractions of the nightlife and all the bad things here in Tofu. So it works so perfectly because, you take a kid, it's an after school program. So the one thing that we are very big on is education. The kids do not pay to come. It's totally free. The only requirement is that you go to school. And if they can't go to school, we'll pay for them to go into school, pay for all their school fees and equipment, whatever. We just want them to stay in school because that's the most important thing. So it's an after school program. Kids come in every day and they surf, they hang out at the beach. They build this community, this team spirit. They learn about the ocean. They learn about respecting the ocean, their peers. And so it's just a very safe space for kids to be themselves and to enjoy. And after a long day at the beach, I know all of us can say the same, you get really tired, you want to go home, you want to sleep. And then it's the next day and it's back again. You want to go to school because you get so addicted and hooked to surfing. You just want to go to school, finish school, get to the beach. And so perfectly because it keeps the kids off the streets because they're so set on surfing and like chasing that healthy addiction. And so that's pretty much the foundation of our work. And then there's additional stuff that we do, as the kids grow older, we try and transition them into life here. So trying to find where they fit into the community. If they want to pursue higher education, some of them they excel at certain skills, so we try and place them in areas where they can continue to work on those skills, or benefit from those skills and make money. So it's a diversion program for kids, but once the kids pass the age of 18, we're still keeping tabs on them, watching them, making sure that they're doing good. And it's more like it's just like a family thing, it's this big extended family that we're always looking out for them.
Minnie, it's such honourable and wonderful work, and I'm wondering, do those kids after they turn 18 stay there in your beautiful hometown, or are they needing to go to the city that you were speaking of, or other parts of the country or other parts of Africa to pursue more education or more work opportunities?
So far, majority of the kids that after they turn 18, a lot of them stay here and find work here. And more now, because of the charity, they find work within the marine tourism area. There's a couple of kids that do, after 18, pursue higher education, then leave to go to the city or leave to go to the capital, Maputo. It's very rare that kids leave the country, which is something that I wish could happen more. As much as, it's always good to have all these Mozambicans here and like have this homegrown people bring into the community. I think it's very good for them to go outside, experience the culture and experience more outside and learn more, and then come back and bring it here. So it's something in the future that I would love to do, like, get kids to travel and go study abroad, because it really broadens their horizons for what they can do. But also there's a lot of travel difficulties as a Mozambican traveling. So there's a lot of obstacles. Majority of the kids do hang around here, but the ones that have kind of graduated from the program, because we started like 5-6 years ago, and a lot of the kids were like 14, 15, and now they're 18, 19. And I see them every day, some of them are surf instructors, some of them work at the bars and restaurants as chefs, and they seem happy. They seem like they're doing well, and they're very proud of themselves. They know their self-worth and their value, so it's nice to see, because you have this crop of kids that were kids. I saw them as kids, and now they're these young adults, and they're doing well in life, and they're happy, and they still got the ocean. They still go surf. They still go, hang out in the ocean. They come to the club and they see us. And I think it's really nice when they come to the club and the younger kids see them, and we tell them their stories of, this kid started the program, started surfing and swimming, and look at him now, he's doing well for himself. And so it's quite inspiring to have a lot of those characters in the town.
Please stay tuned while we take a quick break to acknowledge the folks who help make our podcast possible. Let's raise a glass to something bigger than just great beer. Meet Stone and Wood, a brewery that thinks big and acts small, right from the heart of Byron Bay. Stone and Wood isn't just about brewing beer, it's about building a community. Certified B Corp and driven by environmental and social responsibility, they're all about making a positive impact one sip at a time. Their philanthropic arm, the Ingrained Foundation, supports local grassroots organizations, channeling funds and volunteer hours straight into the communities they call home, focusing on environmental and social causes close to the heart. Here's to Stone and Wood for crafting exceptional brews and for making a tangible difference in our Northern Rivers community. Patagonia is in business to save our home planet. Founded by Yvonne Chenard in 1973, Patagonia is a surf and outdoor apparel company based in Ventura, California. As a certified B Corp and a founding member of 1% for the Planet, the company is recognized internationally for its product quality and environmental activism, as well as its contributions of nearly $230 million to environmental organizations. Patagonia's unique ownership structure reflects that Earth is its only shareholder. Profits not reinvested back into the business are paid as dividends to protect the planet. Futures makes the first surf fins from recycled fishing nets. Alpha Net Plus is an innovative collaboration between Futures Fins and Borreo, blending carbon and discarded fishing nets. To date, they've transformed more than 35,000 kilos, that's about 77,000 pounds, of discarded fishing nets into new Alpha fins at their headquarters in Huntington Beach, California. Nets that would have otherwise ended up in the ocean. Made for high performance and tested by the best, from our very own Dave Rastovich to friend of the podcast, John Florence, Alpha is available in a wide range of fins for those who want to make a difference with every wave you catch. Learn more at futuresfins.com. The best summer surf seasons go hand in hand with fried eyeballs. Looking perpetually red-eyed might be an indicator of good times, but it also hurts. Good sunnies are a non-negotiable, but ours inevitably get jumbled in the beach bag and the lenses get shredded by sand. Child, that's CHILDE, Eco Eyewear reimagines the way we use sunglasses. Instead of tossing out frames because of scratched lenses, the Child for Life program offers free lens replacement up to 12 months from purchase and for a small fee thereafter. Child makes sunnies and prescription glasses from plants, not petrol. It's eyewear that's made to last and able to be repaired for a smaller energy footprint. Let's reimagine the culture of disposability together. Learn more at childeyewear.com. Minnie, I've heard you refer to this idea of Mozambicans learning or finally seeing and realizing their self-worth. And I was really curious to ask you, because I've heard you say that in a few different interviews. What was it culturally, historically, that you feel like that maybe was making people there feel like they weren't worthy? Did people not have a sense of self-worth because of something that happened culturally in Mozambique? I don't know if there is or not, but I just really wanted to ask you about that because you kept using that same phrase about self-worth.
I think after everything that happened with independence and the Civil War, Mozambique was, starting from the ground up. And education is very important. There was not a lot of that. There was not an abundance of very good education here in Mozambique. And so I know that at the time when I was here, a lot of people from outside would come to Mozambique and start businesses, or they would run companies because the labor was cheap, And I always questioned, like, what do you mean by cheap labor? And they would never say until somebody told me, like, cheap labor because, we don't have to pay them a lot. They don't really know a lot, or they're not educated. They don't know about themselves. So we can pay them very little and they'll do the work. And us Mozambicans are very well known to be very hard workers, So it kind of came off very wrong to me. Like when people said that, like, yeah, there's cheap labor in Mozambique. And it sounded so terrible, It's almost like this idea of like slave pay, like, oh, we can pay them nothing and they'll do all this work for us. And so that kind of rubbed me the wrong way. And I experienced that myself as well growing up when I was working as a surf instructor. When I was growing up with the struggles of everything, like I had to drop out of school. So I couldn't finish school. And I was just working to survive, to make sure that I could pay the bills, help my mom and my little brother, at home, make sure my little brother went to school. I'm very lucky that I have an older brother that also did the same thing. So we both had each other to work. But I was working and like I could see it. Like I wasn't getting paid, or I wasn't getting treated the same way as the others. And the others that were working in the company were foreigners. They were getting double what I was getting paid, but I was the qualified person. Like I was 15, 16, but I was qualified as a surf instructor, and the other guys were not qualified as surf instructors. So that was my first experience with it when I was like 16, 17, and it sucked. It was terrible. And so that's when I experienced it myself, and I was like, this is terrible. And I want to change that. When I started the charity, I wanted to tell kids and teach them that they need to know their own self-worth in this town. If you educate yourself, if you're experienced in a certain area, you should not settle for what these people are going to come in and pay. And it kind of comes down to, as hard as is, that white savior mentality. They see the tourists as people that are going to pay them and help them, but they can help themselves, really. Like Mozambicans are resourceful, crafty people. I read a book, and during the War of Independence and the Civil War, the Mozambicans were very good with agriculture, growing all their fruits and vegetables and everything. And they always made ways to survive because it was tough for them. So I've always known that Mozambicans are very, resourceful and crafty. So if you add in education, then we're on the level of any other, we shouldn't be benchmarking ourselves to anyone else. And so it's just, about teaching the kids that this is your land, this is your home. Don't settle for less, because this is your land of you, your family, and probably a long heritage of other people. So it came up more of a thing that I've heard and then personal experience. And I was like, this has to change because it's not cool.
That's so powerful. And your experience of it is so powerful. And also when we think about the longer line of history, you mentioned slave pay, but also Mozambique has been the site or one of many ports of the slave trade, European slave trade, but also predating the European slave trade, people were stolen and taken to Middle Eastern countries So there's that whole heritage that I can only imagine that would be deep within the genetic memory of people there.
Yep, definitely. And I think a lot of, businesses here and there's also been a couple of other charities and stuff. It's never been done correctly. It's always been done, from the top down and never from the bottom up. It was never bringing the Mozambicans up. It was more like this person's coming to give you handouts and help you, which is not sustainable because they don't learn. It's not going to last long term, So that's why in the charity, when we started, it was very important that we start from the ground up, and we have Mozambican staff only, and that the staff themselves can grow themselves up, and also the kids in the community, So that was very important for us, having a full Mozambican team. That way also the kids can see like, wow, Mozambicans, our teachers, our instructors are these important people in this community. They're strong, powerful people, and they're like us. They're from where we are. They're raised in the same community that we are, and it's more powerful than bringing other people in. And I do believe that other people come in, they have their skills, but it should always be within the locals' hands because they've grown up with this issue. they have the solutions for this issue most of the time. It's a local issue. And so I think that was important with the team that I have here working with me. They all grew up here. They all know the issues very well, and they know how to solve them in the way that it should be done. There's always ways that are faster to solve things, but the politics of everything and culturally doesn't work. They know how to do it properly, that, it's this domino effect that goes on for a long time that'll help them grow and change the lives of them and their kids and everything. So I've learned a lot, with my stuff, because I grew up here since I was a little kid, but I grew up here for the most of my time.
Well spoken.
Yeah, beautifully said, and such an important point. There is another piece in the Afro Surf book. If you're listening and you haven't picked up this book yet, I highly, highly recommend it. There's a piece from Kunyalala Lovu, just after your section, actually, Minnie, in which he writes, quote, "In Africa, surfers should learn from the dark history of our waves and the trade-offs made by our ancestors to build the worlds we now take for granted in the West. There was once a time when those beautiful beach breaks were theaters of horror for humans who, along with ivory, gold, and cloth, were fed into an opulent capitalist machine. We can break that cycle and ensure not only that it doesn't happen again, but that we physically learn from this past. We can give back more than our ancestors took." I have been really moved by Lavu's writing, and I just feel like you're such an important link in this puzzle, Minnie, in moving surfing culture on a global scale from a single stream story, from a very whitewashed story, into a multi-streamed, complex, beautiful narrative told by the grassroots, told by communities, and building surfing communities that make sense for each beach, really.
Yeah, thank you. Those are beautiful words. While you were saying that, I was actually thinking that here in Tofu, there was a very dark history of the point. So the point, we have this beautiful wave, Tofino. It's like this point wave, right-hand point break, beautiful wave. And there's a monument that sits at the top of it. Very, very strong, like monument, very powerful. But behind it, there was actually a landmark there that in the time when the Portuguese were here, they would take the Mozambican slaves and they would throw them down, if they were old, they were not working. And so that's our history, that place that we enjoy, waves that we surf, and it's beautiful, and we love it. There's a deep, dark history there, and we embrace that. We know that that's there. And so, I think having Mozambican surfing and being at the front of it, it's very important as well, because like that's our history, and we want to, like, we can't shy away from it. That's what it was. But like, we can change the way that we write history as Mozambicans and not have somebody else that's non-Mozambican write it for us.
Yeah. And I feel like this book, we keep going back to it, but for me, I'm long in the tooth now. I'm in my 40s and I've been a surf rat my whole entire life. I've done very little else. I've been exposed to a lot of surfing communities around the world for a long time. And when I picked up Afro Surf and were reading words from the surfers in all of these amazing corners
from you
of Africa. Yeah, you're one of them, man. I felt so enriched, and I just felt that surfing as a whole can only be stronger and only be more wonderful and beautiful and healthy through these kinds of expressions and these unique place-based points of view and personalities and stories. And I just really want to thank you for being who you are and offering what you're doing out into the world, because you've said it a few times, you're in a bubble there, and it looks like a very special little bubble. And the way surfing is, we can fall head over heels for surfing, and it can take over your life, and all of a sudden decades go by and all you've been doing is riding waves and being with your friends in your community. And that's fine, that's wonderful. But what I see you doing is sharing all of that stoke, that aloha, that love, that culture, and your intelligence, your way to articulate it is, I feel, really important. I actually feel it's really, really important I'm sure it is important for you to feel that you're seen and heard in the world. And I also feel it's really important for the rest of us to hear and feel what you and so many others are putting out. And yeah, I just wanted to have a moment to really thank you for that and just say how stoked I am and so thankful that us as surfers have a broader picture of ourselves now. And that's a wonderful thing.
Thank you very, very much. It means a lot, those words coming from you. Obviously, growing up as well, I watched you surf. It was quite crazy that I'm getting to be able to do this, and talk to you guys, and it's very inspirational for me, and it's a huge milestone in my journey as a surfer. And back to the book Afro Surf, I think I really believe that it's one of those books or pieces. It's a piece of information that just transcends the sport of surfing. It's just it's insane. Like Afro Surf was, and I'm very, very blessed and very lucky that I got a chance to be included in that book, and it's definitely changed my life. But all those stories in there's so many inspirational people in that book, and there's so much more to learn. There's definitely a lot more to learn. And yeah, I surfing for me, has given me a purpose. And as much as I love to do surfing just for fun, but I really feel like my purpose in surfing is to make a change and make a difference. And I'm very, very lucky to be in that position that I am in. And I'm not stopping. I'm very patriotic as well. I love my country. I love Mozambique. I want to get Mozambique out there. But at the same time, I'm African. I love Africa. When you're from Africa, you want to travel to Europe and you want to whatever. But now it's become this very cool, interesting time where like African surfers want to travel within Africa. I want to go and see and experience the cultures of West Africa and exchange information and knowledge with them. I want to see Africa at the forefront of surfing. It's our time.
How far are we, Minnie, from seeing Mozambique represented in the Olympics?
Not far. I will make that promise that we're not far, because it is my goal now to get a team. We have a team, but there's just a bit of bureaucracy that we have to cross, getting the surfing association and the federations all set up. But I am motivated as ever to get a team. That's my goal for the next 5 years. And I've been telling everyone that like in the next 5 years, I'm going to put all my time and energy into that, as alongside the charity. The charity is very important to me, but as an athlete, as my own individual goals, like I want to get to the Olympics, but I don't want to get there by myself. I want to get there with the rest, with my friends, with the others, with my other fellow Mozambicans. And so we're not far. We're not far, because I'm going to put a lot of energy into that. And it would be amazing to see the flag being presented in at the Olympics for surfing. Like no one believed that surfing could be a professional sport. It could have been something that would be recognized by the government, and now it is. And so yeah, the Olympics is there, and we're gonna get there.
That's so great. When you think of that and you think of leaving the waves that you have in your backyard there, are there anywhere like that jumps out in your mind first up that you would love to get to and compete in a lineup somewhere beyond the horizon? Have you got like a top list of waves that you want to get to?
Yeah, definitely. I think everyone always, Hawaii is up there. It's like, that's where you go and prove yourself. Not that I have anything to prove. I don't need to prove myself there, but I just want to go there and be there. I don't surf for the validation of other people. I surf for myself and to make a change. So I don't need that, but Hawaii is definitely up there. I have a weird fascination for like waves that are not like super accessible to people, so like all those countries up, the Nordic countries, Norway, Iceland, I went to Scotland, and that was quite an experience for me surfing, because one, it was freezing. I went in winter, it was snowing, but I fell in love with it because it was just the process of surfing, the culture of surfing, seeing like it's freezing cold, but these guys are going out of the way to get their fix for surfing, So like surfing is so easy and accessible here. That's the one thing that's beautiful here. You don't need much to surf. You can go naked if you wanted to. In Scotland, it requires a lot more. And it's just like, it was more of a spiritual feeling of surfing, And so it was my first time in the snow surfing, but I didn't feel cold. I loved it. And so like it really kind of sparked this interest in like, I want to go surf those waves that not many other people surf. It doesn't have to be, sunny and palm trees. That's what I grew up. So that's so normal to me. I want to go to where it's like, it's harder to surf, but like people, I see how they do it, and like I'm like, wow, I respect how much they like appreciate surfing, because they're going into the elements to just get this fix that like, for me, it's just, I walk out the door, I walk a couple of kilometers and I go surf. So those ones are up on the bucket list, and more obviously like within Africa. I think in Africa, it's surf, but it's also just more meeting the people. Like, in Liberia is one of the countries I really want to go to, because there's the story of all those child soldiers that traded in their guns to surf. And that's just such a beautiful story that I want to go and meet those people and talk to them and see, how surfing transformed their life and how it is continuing to transform their life and their community. So
we recorded an episode with Taki Gold, who grew up in Liberia and lived through the Civil War there and now lives in California. And yes, it is unbelievable what he lived through and now is a surfer in California.
That's so, it's just crazy. Like, it's so inspiring to see like what surfing can do, how it can change lives and people. And it's one of the best things that I've ever done, in my life and continue to do. And just, it's nice to see it being passed on, seeing it with other people, seeing how kids come up to me and just being like, wow, surfing changed my life now because I'm so much more aware of all this. And I feel like I've grown as a person. That's beautiful. That's what keeps me coming back, like surfing with the purpose.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, meaningful play is definitely something we're often talking about here. And it makes me think of Minnie wanting to share with you something that's happened in Australia, I don't know, the last 10 years or so. There was a sort of a proliferation, if I can get that word out of my mouth. There was a spreading of surf festivals, basically. The idea was that the timeline of surfing in Australia has always been a very sporty one in terms of the European version of it, and very much about winning and losing and the hyper-competitive mindset. And so kind of in balance to that, there has always been the other side of surfing where, a lot of people here in this country have really mindfully stepped away from that hyper-competitive worldview and style of approaching surfing. And so a few years ago in Noosa and in Byron Bay area, near to where we live, these surf festivals were popping up, and it was basically just a celebration of a broader range of types of surfing and the sharing of it. And it was really popular for a while there. And maybe it was COVID that really slowed it all down or something. But
and it really centered around the culture. So it was films and it was music, it was art.
Multi-generational.
It was a lot more than just riding waves.
Yeah, exactly. It was all kinds of things related to it. There was all ages, all gender, just really inclusive. And they were so wonderful and so fun, and it was such a great way to bring together people who had only ever really gotten together in big numbers with surfing for a winning and a losing dynamic. And I can say that here in Oz, there are a lot of kids who have been funneled through the competitive sort of machine through Surfing Australia and the surfing contest route here, that they kind of lost the therapy of surfing. They lost the simple joy of it because it was heaped on with, sponsorship ideas and ideas of fame, ideas of goals, or even just as simple as ideas of being able to nail a certain maneuver and not feeling good unless you really have that air reverse on lock or whatever it is you want to be able to do at any moment on a wave. And so anyway, I just thought I'd bring that up with you in terms of being in a young surfing community where everything is fresh and malleable and you can, really play with a lot of ideas, where perhaps in Australia we have, a bit of rigidity with previous generations thinking surfing is just one way or the highway sort of thing. I wondered if you had any thoughts around any of that.
Yeah, I've definitely experienced that and been a part of that. When I was coming up in surfing, I started surfing when I was 14, very, very late for anyone who's trying to become professional. So when I started, everyone was like, it's too late. There's no ways you can't become a professional surfer. But, I love when people tell me that I can't do something, because then I do it. So I did it. But the way that was put forward to me is like, you got to compete. Competing is the only way forward. Growing up, I loved watching guys free surf. That was my thing. And I always thought like one day maybe I'll be able to free surf, because like free surfing is so cool. And all these guys that are free surfing, they're not like, they have their own style. They're not surfing for somebody, they're surfing for themselves, that type. So I went into the competitions when I started, and that was also to try and help me gain sponsorship. But I grew up around the ocean, no coach, no one to tell me how to surf. I just surfed how I felt like surfing. And I obviously watched other people surf and then try to surf like them, but never had a coach. So I was never told how to surf in a certain way. I always surfed for myself. And so never grew up with contests. and everything. So my first contest, I went into a QS event, and I got like, guys grow up in the junior divisions in the ranks, and they come up, and I just went straight into a QS contest and I lost. And so it was like the hardest thing to deal with. But, I never competed before. So I remember a bit of a story. I remember when I lost, I had all the support and everyone helped me to get to the contest. First round, I lost. And I was so like upset, and I was really like disappointed in myself. I remember sitting in my room and what am I doing? I can't do this. I'm not, I'm not like the other guys who grew up when they were 7 or 8 learning how to surf. And then I remember that I got a call from my staff here in Mozambique, because I was in South Africa, and it was my staff and the kids all on the phone, and they were like, "Oh, even though you're lost, you're still our hero, you're our inspiration." And that kind of fueled me back up. That was like a big moment in me, like, because I was like, I'm not surfing for myself, I'm surfing for other people here. And it was a special moment, because I'm like, if I lose, I don't care, because I'm just showing up. And so when I had the opportunity to do the movie, which was Chasing the Unicorn, the one thing that I wanted was that, people that don't surf watch this movie. I wanted to be that type of movie that like people that don't surf will watch it. It's not just about high performance, octane surfing, airs. I want there to be a story. I want that movie to leave something behind for us, So people that have come to Mozambique, that have, pro surfers and all that have come here and filmed their video parts, they've never mentioned the Mozambican surfing community. So it's always been this image of uncrowded, untouched waves, nobody, but we're here. We've been here, and so that's what I wanted to change in the movie. I wanted people to know, like, yes, there is a surfing community. We are here. We're young, but, we're here, and we're trying to make a change. And so, in the movie, it was important for that to be shown. And the response to it was insane. Like, I didn't think that was going to blow up the way it did. I was just like, this is really cool. I get to show this to my family, my mom, my dad, and my friends. And then people from all over the world started messaging me, like saying, wow, Mozambique is really cool, and what you're doing with the charity. And it was really cool, because like, it wasn't like, wow, you're a really good surfer. It was more like, you're a great surfer, but what you're doing is even better. And so that for me was like, I was very happy to hear that, because to be known as like a incredible surfer, we can do all this thing, it's cool, but I'd rather, be known to be somebody that helped others and is a great surfer at the same time, and bringing everyone with me. There's an African proverb that you probably know, if you want to go somewhere fast, go alone. But if you want to go further, you got to bring everyone with you. And so that's what I've always lived by.
It's wonderful. Well, I know Lauren's giving me hand gestures to stop there, because it's a great place to stop. But I really I feel like there's one area we have to go to, and that is when you just said going fast. I have to think about the type of waves that you call home there, and I can relate. I grew up surfing sand bottom point breaks that are kind of below sea level, and where tube riding is quite a mystical experience. And I want to know what role that has played, because as far as I can tell in my surfing life, surfers are shaped by the waves that they ride. And those of us who live near to long peeling point breaks have a certain style of surfing that reflects that. And I would say even sometimes attitudes that can reflect that. People who grew up next to and within slabs and wild, intense coastlines tend to be kind of wild, intense people. And it's just something that I've observed over the years, and I think it's quite interesting. And so I'd like to know what you feel in terms of the waves that you get to ride there. And I know it's like us here, you don't always have those sand bottom dredging speed demon waves on call. It's pretty rare. But how does it feel to ride those waves and have those kind of waves in your backyard and call those kind of waves home?
It's truly a blessing. I believe, maybe I'm a bit biased, but I live in one of the best waves in the world. And I know a lot of people say that, but about their own spots. But like Mozambique, just in general, the wave is incredible. The landscape is incredible. The people, amazing people. Have to shout out to Mozambican people, because they're some of the best people you'll ever meet. And the wave is just like it's a right hand point break. It has different moods. Some days it's really fast and sectiony. Some days it's just super long and it peels and you have a lot of time. But the one thing that you'll always have on that wave is speed. As you said, speed is like something that you take off and you're always going to have speed. So growing up on a point break, you learn how to control the speed. I think, here at Tofino, the right hand point break, you take off and you're learning how to control the speed. Because sometimes you take off and you're flying. And so it's definitely shaped me as a surfer. I've learned how to control speed and output the speed into turns. My area where I'm better at surfing is power. I'm very good at outputting power. The air game and all that stuff is like, it's all the little fun stuff. But like I've always grown up as a surfer that's surf with power. So speed, control with the speed, and then you have power. When I go to beach breaks, I find myself struggling because sometimes at beach breaks, you got to make speed. Everything happens so much faster. So that's the one thing about growing up on a point break. And I think it also kind of is like, it talks a lot about the town. Like the point break kind of has its similarities to the town. Super laid back, super relaxed. Things move slow, which is like Tofu here. Things move slow. Everyone is laid back. And it's the same as the waves. You go out there, sometimes it's a bit laid back. It's slow, but it's definitely molded me to who I am. I think
Please stay tuned while we take a quick break to acknowledge the folks
I'm
who
laid
help
back,
make our
but I
podcast
will be
possible.
outspoken when it needs to be.
Yeah, totally.
To be outspoken. We're three brothers, and I've always been the outspoken one with my older brother and my younger brother. I always stand up for them, so I'm the one that's always speaking up for them and for others. And so,
yeah, there it is. That's the thing again. That's that reflection again. So you have that sort of range where you have that wave in front of town there where it is perhaps a little slower and it's mellow and everything, and that's that side of you that is like that. But then you have that fifth gear, sixth gear where you can go very, very fast and surf very, very powerfully, and you can be 17 years old and starting a charity, and you can be running it and be now in your early 20s, mid 20s, and still running with that kind of work. So yeah, you're continuing my theory here about people being sculpted by the waves they ride.
Are your brothers surfers too, Minnie?
So we all started together, and having siblings is always very competitive. So we all started together. My older brother fell off because we progressed really quick, myself and my younger brother. So my older brother, he went into diving, so he's a dive instructor. Myself and my younger brother, we still surf. So yeah, we all started surfing together. And whenever we all together, we have the chance, because everyone lives in different places, we still enjoy surfing together, and it's like the best thing ever. But yeah, my little brother still surfs, so I get to share that with him. And he's a really good surfer too. So he's one of the guys that really pushed me, very, very good surfer, powerful, goofy footer. So it's nice to be pushed by a brother. You have this like extra, I want to beat you, but it's great. Like, it's healthy competition. So we're all in the ocean. We're all involved in the ocean. And I think it speaks for itself about people that grow up here. You will one way or another find a way to be involved in the ocean.
Have you managed to get your mama into the water?
No, I have not. My mom is it's so hard. She just, she doesn't really want to give it a try. She knows what we do and she's very supportive, but I don't think the beach is of her place. Like my mom, it was always weird for me seeing my mom living here but never going to the beach. My mom doesn't go hang out at the beach or, go swim. She'll swim like 2 or 3 times a year. So I don't think the ocean is a place for her, but she's very supportive and very confident of us being in the ocean. So she's fine with it. My dad, I haven't seen him for 13 years. And so when I do see him, I want to see if I can try and get him in, but he's an old man now. So I'm not sure I'll be able to get him in the water, but it's okay. We're first generation in our family line and heritage. We're the first ones that have been in the ocean. Everyone else in my mom's side and my dad's side have nothing to do with the ocean.
Minnie, is there anyone else that you've encountered in surf media or films who you feel like you look to as a model for a surfer who surfs well, but who's also using surfing beyond just their own personal benefit?
That's a very good question. Well, somebody who's definitely inspired me a lot and who's guided me in my life, not necessarily like a incredible famous surfer, but Tom Hewitt, who is the CEO of Surfers Not Street Children. He started a charity in Durban. I got blessed to be able to go to Durban and to volunteer there and see what they were doing. So Tom is definitely somebody who's inspired me because like he's been helping, kids in Durban for years and years and years. So he's definitely somebody who inspires me, but like somebody like big in the surfing world, I think the way that I'm moving into, and I've always loved free surfing, Mikey Febb is incredible. He's got an incredible style. He's a really nice person too. I got to meet him in J-Bay and he's so, so nice. And I remember he came here during the one swell and I saw him on the beach and I was like having a fanboy moment and I went up to him and I wanted to greet him and he shook my hand. He's like, "Oh, I heard about you." And that was the craziest thing to me, like the fact that he kind of heard about me, because I didn't think that he did. But he was super cool, super humble, super nice. And he's definitely somebody that's put Africa on the map, with his style, his vibe and everything. And he's opened the door for us as well as African surfers.
For those of us who are inspired to visit Mozambique, your beautiful home there, how can we do it in a way that is as respectful and supportive of the local community as possible?
Yeah, that's a very, very important question. I think a lot of people oversee this, but first of all, we're very, very welcoming people. We love having visitors come and visit us. And so whenever you come into Mozambique, I think it's very important to go into the local culture, the local areas, like hang out with the locals. And you don't have to go look for them. They'll find you. They're going to come and find you. They're going to take you back to their houses. They're going to take you to the areas where they hang out and they chill. So here in Tofu, coming in, making sure that you're respectful to the locals, spending money, but we rely on it, but spending money within the local establishments and the restaurants, that definitely goes a long way because we rely on tourism. Right now, we're at the period where there's like not a lot of tourists, so people start to struggle at this time of the year. So whenever we do have tourists, I always encourage them, go to the local areas. Go to the local restaurants, go to the local bars, experience the local culture. There's a lot of things here that are tailored towards showing people how we live, but in a very respectful manner, because like there's places where you go and like going into somebody's house and it's kind of weird to go into somebody's house, but you can see like, the way that we live without being too intrusive. So there's definitely like tours that offer that. And then just, coming in with an open mind and an open heart is always important. But people here, they're the best people ever. Mozambicans are some of the nicest people ever. And I always say that whenever I leave and I travel somewhere else and, people, it's all where you live. Some people live in the city and life is hard. And I understand that. And they can be a little bbit, tough. Whenever I come here, it's just so relaxed. And it's so nice. And even people in Maputo in the city, they're also super nice. Just it's Mozambican. It's in our DNA to be just like super warm and welcoming and nice. And so just come over. That's it.
Thanks for listening with us today. If you liked what you heard, please consider sharing an episode with a friend. Our editor this season is the multi-talented, absolute legend, Ben Jake Alexander. The soundtrack was composed by Shannon Sol Carroll, with additional tunes from the very talented Kai McGilvray. We have a few new Water People experiments this season. You can find every episode of the podcast on our Water People YouTube channel, or you can subscribe to our very infrequent newsletter and get book recommendations, questions we're pondering, and behind-the-scenes glimpses into recording the podcast, and more, via our website, waterpeoplepodcast.com. As usual, we'll be continuing today's conversation on Instagram, where we're at Water People Podcast.